Listen, you smell something?
Human emotions are materializing in the form of a viscous psychoreactive plasm with explosive supernormal potential.
What a discovery, a psychoreactive substance.
Do you know what this equipment is used for?
Boggle or Super Mario Brothers?
We'll have fun!
Yeah!
They're still doing it. Really quite good work there.
My friend, don't be a jerk.
We've got no choice. Call the Ghostbusters.
Super Jackpot!
Welcome to Extraplasm Podcast. It's the only podcast on the internet that's ready to believe that an ideal way to ring in Ghostbusters Day is to go out on YouTube, watch way too many videos on how to ferment mead from bottles of Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew, and then apply the same methodologies to bottles of homemade Ecto Cooler to come out with something a little bit paranormal, a little bit celebratory, and a little bit boozy. I'm your host, Jim Maritato, aka Vape Maniac on the internet, and I'm excited to be back with you this week, not just because we're getting ready to celebrate Ghostbusters Day, and not just because we're getting ready to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the franchise, and not because I'm coming to you from an undisclosed secret location on the East Coast known as the Parent Trap, aka my parents' house, and not a weird parental-themed speakeasy somewhere, but because our guest is one of the most busy, important, and yet kind people who we have to thank for working to bring us more ghosts and ghostbusting as we reach the 40th anniversary of the franchise, and that person is Ghost Corps' Eric Reich, aka President Ghostbuster, which is the name I give to him and not the one he uses himself, to be clear. And if you're wondering who Eric Reich is or why I refer to him as President Ghostbuster, you need to know why. And that's because Eric is the Senior Vice President, Executive Producer, and Brand Manager for Ghost Corps. And as you'll hear about in this episode, if there's something official, licensed, or in the works related to Ghostbusters over at Sony and Columbia Pictures, Eric's hands have very likely been on it in some capacity. So I'm so thrilled to bring you this conversation this week, as Eric is not only somebody chiefly responsible for so much of the joy we all share together and the things we talk about each week, but also a wonderful person to chat with and a great human being. So I'm really excited to bring you this week because, this is an episode I've wanted to get done for a while, and that Eric and I have been talking for several months about how to get finished and kind of get put together, given the release of Frozen Empire and the marketing for it. And so to have this all come together as we celebrate the 40th anniversary is a real piece of serendipity and kind of something I think is really awesome. So we're going to get into that conversation with Eric in a few moments, and I'm totally excited to do that with you. But before we can, we need to get into some news, and that means we've got to get into Ghostbusters headlines.
Still making headlines all across the country, the Ghostbusters are at it again.
Today, the entire eastern seaboard is alive with talk of incidents of paranormal activity.
Call-in topic today, ghosts and ghostbusting.
Extraplasm, read all about it. Ghostbusters headlines coming at you.
In Ghostbusters Day news, which is what a lot of headlines is going to be this week, frankly, as you likely know, we're just about 3 days away from celebrating Ghostbusters Day if you're listening to this on the day the podcast comes out. And that means we're also about 3 days away from celebrating the 40th anniversary of the franchise. And it's incredibly cool to have Eric here on hand for today's episode as we touch on the 40th anniversary. We've talked in the last few weeks about the events that are taking place in New York City for the celebration of Ghostbusters Day to benefit the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and the NYC firefighters, as well as the event that the LA Ghostbusters have organized with the City of Los Angeles, Ghost Corps, and Starlight Foundation to celebrate the 40th anniversary and announce a new wave of fundraising with Starlight Foundation. So we have some ideas of the things that have been happening or are going to be happening, and obviously the events that are taking place at Hook and Ladder 8 in New York City have been well publicized by the Buffalo Ghostbusters for many months. I mean, we still have more things to talk about today to announce that they have put out in the last week because it's mind-blowing how much they have put out. But the key question that many people have been asking and that I've had asked of me in direct messages for the last 2 or 3 weeks is anything happening on the Sony lot for Ghostbusters Day and for the 40th anniversary? And as it turns out, and as you'll hear Eric talk about shortly in our chat after headlines, there is in fact an event planned on the lot for the 8th. That will involve a screening of Frozen Empire and a celebration of the 40th anniversary for invited guests in what amounts to a bit of a friends and family celebration. And as I understand it, our friends over at Yes Have Some podcast may even be on hand for it. So look for some coverage from them for sure. But whether they are there or not, repeatedly mentioned and much adored friend of Extraplasm podcast, JD Raymer, will be attending and will be working to get as much content as he can and sharing it directly with folks and collaborating with Extraplasm to do so via its Instagram feed. So, I'm not going to be on hand at that event, as I've talked about for a while, because I won't be in LA for Ghostbusters Day and I'll be in New York. But thankfully, friend of the podcast, JD Raymer, aka someone who I've been lovingly referring to as my decoy out in the world because people sometimes think he's me as one of the only people wearing an Extraplasm t-shirt in the world, will be at that event, and we'll be sharing his content via the Extraplasm Instagram feed as a collaboration. So look for that content on Extraplasm's social media feed, specifically on Instagram, because that's where you're going to find it. I think. I don't know the collaborations will cross post to Facebook. So if you're not on Instagram, make sure you're over there. And while JD is going to be bringing us coverage in the evening for this event down at the Sony lot, as this is an outdoor screening happening on the lot in the evening, kind of like a drive-in movie, but without the cars, unless you're counting Ecto-1s that might be there, I'll be bringing you coverage during the day straight from the firehouse, and whatever may follow the event that's kind of formally announced there, like the NYC Ghostbusters walking tour, or perhaps convincing some nice people from New Jersey who have Cadillacs to give me a ride again, because that was amazing. Are you listening, Nick and Greg? I digress, but I mean, who knows what's going to happen afterwards? But the point is that thanks to JD's generous contributions, we're going to have hopefully some bi-coastal Ghostbusters Day social media coverage. And, you know, with our friends in LA kicking things off with Starlight Foundation on the 7th, with the city officials with a formal proclamation declaring June 8th as Ghostbusters Day, my coverage happening during the day on the 8th, and then JD's coverage coming in the evening on the 8th. You're hopefully going to get a pretty, wide smattering of content that's going to happen over that day. And even if things totally go wrong with social media that day, or if like somebody drops a camera or whatever happens, there will still be a Ghostbusters Day recap episode for next week's Extraplasm to talk about whatever it is that gets announced, by Ghost Corps, anything else we find out, down at the NYC event, event things to sort of talk about that happened there, etc. And of course, on top of all of your Ghostbusters Day news, and maybe even joining us for that recap next week, we'll see if he's up for it, will be the Lord and Master of Ghostbusters News, Jason Fitzsimmons. And yes, Jason, if you're listening, that is now officially your title. You're no longer like proprietor or reporter. You're now Lord and Master of Ghostbusters News. Just roll with it. But Jason won't be on the road with us. He will be at home turning the knobs, pulling the levers, and wheezing the juice in an Encino Man sense to make that makes Ghostbusters News go. So I'm excited that he'll be at home sort of cultivating and synthesizing all the things that are being announced. So of course you should be following Ghostbusters News for Ghostbusters Day coverage as well. There's tons of coverage coming your way from Extraplasm and a bunch of other great people too. So what is there left to tell you about then, other than the fact that there's this event happening on the Sony lot for invited guests? And no, don't ask me, can I get invited? I have no idea how you get invited. This is not a question I can answer for you. I just know the event is happening, and you'll hear Eric talk more about it in a little bit on the podcast. But what else do we have to talk about that you haven't heard about yet? Well, I mean, you've heard a lot, right? Outside of the news about the event on the lot, you've heard a ton about the Buffalo Ghostbusters event, and you've heard a ton about their various auctions, their raffles, their t-shirt that's available, their patch that's available, that they have prop firehouse tiles that you can potentially win while supporting a good cause and what have you. But a couple other things that they've announced just in this past week include that there's a very cool chance for you to spiff out your Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed character if you're a fan of the IllFonic game. Buffalo Ghostbusters have announced they'll be giving away 5 special codes to unlock the Extreme jersey. If you don't know what that is, you don't play enough Spirits Unleashed. If you do play Spirits Unleashed, then you probably already know what it is, but let's just get everybody on the same page. It's a coveted piece of Ghostbusting gear possessed by only some of the game's most dedicated and elite players. It essentially illustrates that you are amongst the most extreme players, and often when you see 4 people wearing these who drop into your matchmake, you suddenly become nervous because you imagine they're probably going to be really tenacious people who try to put you in the box over and over again if you're a ghost, and then you run from them. I digress from this, but I think that this is really cool. This is a really nice perk if you're somebody who plays Spirits Unleashed that also gets IllFonic involved a little bit in the Ghostbusters Day celebration that's happening down at the firehouse. And I think that's really awesome. I think that's cool that they have a DLC coming out hopefully in the next week or two, as we knew that was going to be happening around Ghostbusters Day. But, to sort of see them getting involved with this charitable effort is also really cool. In addition to that really cool opportunity to spiff out your Spirits Unleashed avatar, there will also be, for those of you attending the event in New York City, a really cool opportunity to pick up a challenge coin for $20. These are going to be limited to 2 per person. So if you're planning on coming to the event with the plan of buying them and then putting them on eBay for like $600 a pop or something, like you were at a premiere, don't do that because you can only buy 2 of them. And let's be real, they're not premiere coins. But the point I'm making here more is that there's a really cool challenge coin that you can get that has the logo for the 40th anniversary and for the Firehouse event on one side. It's got other Ghostbusters paraphernalia celebrating the 40th anniversary on the opposite side and celebrating the firehouse. And again, these are $20 each. So if you're into collecting challenge coins commemorating your various NYC Ghostbusters trips, you're definitely going to want to pick one of these up. And if you're not coming to the event and you know somebody who it is, you need to find your friend who's willing to buy an extra for you. But remember, your friend can only buy one extra if they're buying one for themselves because it's a limit of 2. So if you have like 10 people who need to get these, you better find 10 friends real fast. Just kidding. But I think that this is a really cool thing. You know, I love the fact that we all at this point have challenge coins that kind of commemorate the various places we show up together. And to see this one come together is really great. And again, this is something that Eric Christensen over at the Moogly Fan Club has contributed, as he's done a lot of the patch and logo work for this event. So it's really great to see another cool piece of sort of tchotchke or collectible that's related to this event that you can grab. And that, again, goes to support the Tunnel to Towers Foundation and New York City firefighters, like all of the other merchandise or all the other things that you can do and get for the 40th anniversary from Buffalo Ghostbusters, whether it's raffles, auctions, t-shirts, whatever. All of that stuff is going to a great cause. Something that's not being officially organized by Buffalo, but they have announced and let people know about, is that there will actually also be a screening of Ghostbusters happening in Alamo Drafthouse in New York City at the Ivan Reitman Theater, which, if you've ever seen that, that's the theater that has a Stay Puft statue in it. That's very cool. That is going to be happening, I believe, at 3:15 in the afternoon. I would tell you to buy tickets for it, except that I believe that all but one seat in the front row and the 2 handicapped chairs and the companion seats for them have already been sold out over at Alamo Drafthouse at the last time I checked. But if you're going to that, that is going to be a Ghostbusters movie party event. If you've never seen an Alamo Drafthouse movie party event, it's kind of cool because usually Alamo Drafthouse is a place where you go, you eat, you drink while you watch a movie, and they tell you if you make even a sound, they have reserved the right to throw you out. But in this case, a movie party is essentially an opportunity to almost like Rocky Horror the experience by saying the lines along with the movie, by dancing in your seat, and by getting some cool props from Alamo, and usually like some sort of themed food and drink items that are available. In this case, I believe they're going to be handing out slime and what looks like potentially a like foam marshmallow tchotchke inside of a sealed bag with Ghostbusters branding on it. So pretty cool. If you're going to this, it sounds like it's going to be really neat. I'm not sure if Alamo is doing screenings or movie parties in other cities. I have been to a Ghostbusters movie party before in Los Angeles that didn't look as cool as this, quite frankly, because we only got like a little jar of slime and that was about it. But it was a good time regardless, because I got to hang out with cool people, including friend of the show and contributor for this weekend, JD Raymer. And so I think that if you have the opportunity to go to this, it'll be a lot of fun. But like I said, at this point, it looks like if you don't already have tickets, it's probably going to be hard to experience. And it's not something, like I said, that's affiliated with the Buffalo Ghostbusters Nyc Ghostbusters event at the Firehouse or the walking tour. It is something that just happens to be happening on June 8th to celebrate Ghostbusters Day. But if you're in NYC and you happen to be able to get tickets to that, then it may be something you want to check out. But what if you're not going to New York City or Los Angeles? Well, if you live near one of the 24 locations in North America that are showing the original Ghostbusters film on June 8th, then you may be able to celebrate down at your local theater. The Ghostbusters social media accounts announced this week that the film will have a limited release in celebration of the 40th anniversary, with screenings at select locations in the United States in Arizona, California, Colorado, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. And in Canada, there are several locations screening the movie in Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. And so for our friends north of the border, you may be able to go to those various places and check them out. I won't read you the 24 locations and theater names on the air because that seems like it'll take a really long time. But if you want to check out the full list of participating theaters, including the aforementioned Alamo Drafthouse in New York City, you can go over to the Ghostbusters Instagram account and check out the posts they've made, or you can go look at Jason Fitzsimmons' coverage over on Ghostbusters News, where he has diligently listed each and every one of those theaters. So check that out. It may be playing in your area, especially if you're in one of those states. And, you know, it's always fun to get a group of people together in flight suits and go down to the theater and watch Ghostbusters, even if you can't make it out to an official Ghostbusters Day event. Just make it your Ghostbusters Day event. But what if the movie isn't playing near you, or you just intend to celebrate Ghostbusters Day at home? Well, beyond the social media coverage from Ghost Corps, Extraplasm, Ghostbusters News, Yes Have Some, probably the Cross Rip, hopefully, one would hope, and others, one way you can celebrate is by signing up to try and win some cool Ghostbusters Day merch from Numbskull Designs, retailer Just Geek, and our buddy Jason over at Ghostbusters News, as they have some various Tubbs figures, those little ducks that I've talked about before, up for grabs, including Dana Barrett, Gozer the Gozerian, a Terror Dog, Louis Tully, and apparently some mini tubs of the 4 Ghostbusters and Slimer. If you're into this, you can enter pretty easily. All you have to do is go over to Instagram, make sure you're following Ghostbusters News, and then find the post that has the Tubbs Ducks on it and says Ghostbusters Day giveaway. And make sure that you both like and comment on the post, letting Jason know which of those cosplaying ducks is your favorite. And a random winner will be drawn on June 8th on Ghostbusters Day. So it's an opportunity to pick up some cool little ducks that are Ghostbusters themed if you're into that kind of stuff. If you're into like little vinyl figures, this is pretty neat, pretty awesome. And if you're into fan films, then there's going to be an opportunity on Ghostbusters Day to ring in the holiday with a celebration of media that's been produced by fans. There's a 6-hour fan film marathon taking place on June 8th from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Eastern. That'll be happening on Spectrum Channel 991 and AT&T Uverse Channel 99 in the U.S., and it'll be available streamed live worldwide through the Miami Valley Communication Council's video-on-demand website at vod.mvcc.video. A complete lineup of films is pending, but the marathon will be hosted by Mike Soprani of the Real Ohio Ghostbusters and may feature shout-outs from Ghostbusters franchises who sent in video submissions before last week's deadline. So to recap here, you've got a whole bunch of stuff going on this weekend. You've got the LA Ghostbusters kicking things off on the 7th with the City Council, Starlight Foundation, and Ghost Corps, with the presumed attendance from Jason Reitman, who will hopefully be speaking at that event as they kind of talk about Ghostbusters Day and commemorate Ghostbusters Day and literally solidify it as a holiday within the city of Los Angeles as a proclamation from the government, which is kind of hilarious and to think about that like the government is involved in declaring Ghostbusters Day now. I love this. And then after that event on the 7th, there's going to be obviously Ghostbusters Day at the Firehouse in New York, kicking off at noon Eastern, and that's going to be from 12 to noon for the official event, followed by the walking tour that's going to kick off from 2 to probably about 5 or 6 o'clock, because I believe the walking tour is going to take about 4 hours for those who are attending it with the NYC Ghostbusters. And at that point, you are going to probably start to look west and look for some coverage from the Ghostbusters event that's going to be happening on the lot, whether that's coming from the Ghostbusters official accounts, which I imagine there will be something that's going to be put out from them, especially if there's guests coming out and potential speakers. But if not, if nothing else, you're going to be able to turn to Extraplasm, potentially to Yes Have Some, Ghostbusters News, The Crossrip, all your favorite places to get some content and to give you an insight about what's happening on the lot in the evening on the West Coast. So a full day of Ghostbusters events happening for Ghostbusters Day. It's really kind of awesome that the 8th falls on a Saturday this year and that so many things are going on. I do want to stress, if you're at the NYC event, you may see me walking around with a microphone asking people questions like, what does the 40th anniversary mean to you? Or what do you think is important about Ghostbusters Day? And the reason I'll be doing that is because I'm hoping to get some on-the-street interviews to incorporate into an upcoming episode of Extraplasm. So if you see me, you want to answer some of those questions and potentially get on the air and say hi, then feel free to come up and say hi to me. And then, of course, beyond that, I'm hoping to hand out some pins and things to folks. So don't be a stranger. If you listen to Extraplasm, it's always nice to meet people in the world who listen to the podcast and to put names to faces and to Instagram handles and things that, sometimes I'm like, who are you? Your name is Ghost Trap Man. And I don't know who you are until you walk up and tell me that your name is Josh. And then I'm like, oh, cool. Ghost Trap Man is Josh now. And I know that for the future. But so don't be a stranger. Come up and say hi. And I'm so excited to meet people and to see people out at the Firehouse this weekend. Beyond Ghostbusters Day news, we do have a small smattering of other news to talk about. We'll do some quick Ghostbusters merch news here, though to be fair, there's not a lot of it because the bulk of what we should probably expect to hear about is probably waiting for us under the Ghostbusters Day tree to be opened on Saturday. But it's worth noting that the Ghostbusters Tarot deck and guidebook from Insight Editions was officially released yesterday, June 4th, and is now available on Amazon and elsewhere for about $25. This is a 78-card deck with frightening characters, imagery, and themes from the Ghostbusters films that also incorporates the tenets of tarot. And the set comes alongside with an 128-page comprehensive guidebook explaining each card's function or meaning. It comes in a sturdy decorative gift box. You want to see what this looks like? You can go look at pictures, but a better idea is go over to Ghostbusters News on YouTube and check out Jason Fitzsimmons' unboxing video where you can see basically what this looks like hands-on by somebody who has a deep appreciation and love for Ghostbusters stuff. So I would definitely go check that out if you have any interest in these. I don't know how I feel about these, that I don't know a lot about tarot, but I like weird collectible card decks and things. So I have a feeling these will somehow find their way into my house, whether it's by me buying them or by somebody deciding that I need them, which, is always the cool way to get things because then I don't spend money on them when I just get them. because somebody looks at something and goes, you need that. Anyway, if you haven't heard enough cool stuff teased already from HalloweenCostumes.com, and you haven't seen Jason Fitzsimmons show off enough of their cool Halloween decor in his recent YouTube videos, that if you haven't seen, you should go check out. Halloween Costumes has now announced a forthcoming Ghostbusters uniform sweater. So this is priced at $59.99 and debuts on October 17th. The design includes faux stitch zippers and pockets, fake elbow pads, and an embroidered No Ghost logo. It's got name tags that have Velcro on the back of them you can pull off and swap. And it has a design on the back of a proton pack. My best explanation, my best description of this, if you've ever seen the printed hoodies, the screen printed hoodies or t-shirts that look like a Ghostbusters uniform, it's kind of like that, except it's a sweater. So it's essentially the same kind of thing, but in sweater format. You can take a look at product images and find a link to the product page over at Ghostbusters News, or head over to HalloweenCostumes.com and dig around further. Here's a pro tip about Halloween costumes. If you're ever looking for something that's not out yet and you want to find it, it's often at the very end of the stuff that they have listed, because the stuff their algorithm lists first is the stuff that's in stock. So finding something that's coming soon is often a little bit more challenging than just going to Ghostbusters News to grab the link. Beyond those official merch releases, I want to remind you of the cool signing opportunities that Matt Sanders and Tom Henry of TCU Collectibles talked about last week on the podcast. As your window to get in on those private signings with William Atherton, Kevin Mangold, Stuart Ziff, and Hank Mayo are kind of dwindling, some of those opportunities are actually potentially closing sooner than the originally anticipated date of June 21st, because the demand for some of those announced signers is so high that Tom and Matt are anticipating hitting their caps with those signers early. So don't delay in acting on those if you're considering it. But also know that Matt and Tom have put out some kind of funny live stream videos. One where Matt had just come from a run, and the other one where Tom was driving in his car, talking about a potential new signing that may be added this weekend in celebration of the 40th anniversary. They are both very excited about, and also kind of talking about some other potential things that are going on. So you may want to go take a look at those two things in the TCU Collectibles Facebook page if you haven't seen them already. But beyond that, keep your eyes peeled on TCU Collectibles and the Containment Unit Autograph Collecting Group on Facebook this weekend, as it's very likely that there's some additional stuff to be announced. And like I said, the window may be closing quicker than anticipated on some of those high-profile signers, like especially Stuart Ziff, given that he worked on so many things, including Star Wars, and he's never really done signings before. Like, this is really the first private signing he's ever done. He's going to be high in demand. So if you're worried about that, if you're kind of on the fence about getting your signings done, my advice, act now, don't regret later. And lastly, while I think we will have more video game news and potentially a new DLC from Ilphonic to talk about maybe next week, there are a few light pieces of Ghostbusters video game news to know about this week. Specifically for PlayStation players. And in fact, all of the news I'm about to tell you about applies only to people with PlayStations. And if you don't have one, you can kind of tune out until we get done with this. But you might have seen that PlayStation is currently doing their Days of Play event. It is now underway. And as of tomorrow, June 6th, Ghostbusters Rise of the Ghost Lord will be available for free play for PlayStation Premium members. So if you have a PlayStation VR and you're a PlayStation Premium member, be sure to check that out, as you have an opportunity to check out that game essentially for free, because they're celebrating, well, I guess they're celebrating Days of Play, and they're just conveniently doing it with Ghostbusters at the same time as Ghostbusters Day. Who knew? But even if you don't have the VR, if you're a fan of Roblox, there are 3 limited time items to unlock within that game, including a common mini puffed collectible, a rare Pukey collectible, and an ultra rare flying drone collectible. Do these collectibles do anything in Roblox? I have no idea, because I lack both a PlayStation and I've never seen Roblox in my life. So this is not one of those stories where I'm going to be well informed, folks. It's just one where I'm going to tell you that things are happening. But if you have those 2 things and you are signed up for Sony Pictures Core, an app for PlayStation users, you can go get these collectibles. In fact, if you go to the Sony Pictures Core app and click on the thumbnail for Ghostbusters, you can request the code to redeem the mini puffed. However, if you want to redeem the Pukey and drone trap collectibles, then you're going to need to use the Sony Pictures Core app to rent movies. In fact, you'll need to rent a movie that's just a standard movie for the Pukey collectible. And if you want to get the drone trap collectible, you're going to have to rent a movie that has some sort of functionality called PlayStation Plus. One of you out there with a PS5 knows exactly what this means. I have no idea what I'm saying right now. Forgive me for that. I'll be honest, this is given my lack of a PlayStation or Roblox, this is not something I'm really going to be doing. But if this is for you, it's an option out there. But if you like digital collectibles and you don't have Roblox, but you do have a PlayStation, there's still arguably some stuff out there that I think is cooler that you can get from Sony this weekend. As part of the Days of Play event, they are providing 2 digital models that you can download that are essentially 3D renderings of Slimer and of a mini puffed. The Slimer is essentially the Slimer from Frozen Empire, and you can get that one really easily. You can just go out to the PlayStation Rewards catalog and download it for free. It's available now. If you want to get the mini puffed model and be able to put it into your collectibles, you will need to launch a game on PS4 or PS5 while using a Stars loyalty membership. That begins on June 18th. So that's something else that's out there for you. If you're a person who likes to collect all little things and unlockables and achievements in all your video games, these are options for you. I'll be honest, I'm way more excited about a pending DLC that's supposed to be Slimer focused with multiple Slimer skins coming from IllFonic because, let's be real, there's probably a lot of booty in that. We'll find out next week, perhaps. But, if you're into PlayStation and you are kind of into digital collectibles, then this is cool stuff. If you don't have a PlayStation, then hang out. You may have some more exciting video game news to talk about next week as we get through the Ghostbusters Day festivities and IllFonic drops their DLC. And who knows, maybe there'll be something for Rise of the Ghost Lord too. I really don't know. But End Dreams could potentially put out something next week for the 40th as well. Okay. So while I'm totally excited about bringing you more Ghostbusters headlines next week, what I'm more excited about right now is the conversation I'm going to bring you from Eric Reich. This was a great conversation and a great chat to have with Eric, and it's really awesome to find out more about sort of his role at Sony, his responsibilities, how he ended up in the position he's in, and a bit about what Ghostbusters sort of means to him and the 40th anniversary is about for him. So we go now to my conversation with Eric Reich. Joining me on Extraplasm podcast, a person who I have been so stoked to talk with for an incredibly long time, one of the nicest people in the Ghostbusters community who everybody talks about, and a person who wears so many hats that I often use the nickname to describe him as President Ghostbuster. Eric Reich of Ghost Corps is joining us on the podcast today. Eric, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me, Jim.
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. It's something that I've really hoped that we could do for quite a while, and we've worked to kind of negotiate that, and there were points leading up to Frozen Empire where I'd reached out to you, and I was like, I don't think we're going to be able to do this right now, but I hope we can talk pretty soon because you are an instrumental part of what makes Ghostbusters happen. You're involved in so many different things, and at the same time, you've always been incredibly gracious, and you even have sent me emails at 1 o'clock in the morning where I'm like, why are you still awake? And why am I still awake? So
that's when I get my best work done.
I feel very similarly. I joke about it, but it's like where I live underneath the flight path of a naval base that likes to have military plane traffic going through and all kinds of other nonsense. And sometimes I'm like, 2 a.m. is the best time to podcast. It's so quiet.
It is. I'm excited that we could finally make this work. So happy to be here.
Me too. And I appreciate you making the time to do it. And I thought it would be pretty cool to chat with you because, of course, we are leading up to the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters, just days away. This episode's coming out on the 5th of June. So we're just 3 days away from the 40th anniversary of the franchise. We're coming off the success of Frozen Empire, and it's sort of crossing the milestone of $200 million. And everything from my standpoint, I keep saying is awesome. We have the best time to be Ghostbusters fans. And so hopefully that means for you, it's the best time to be President Ghostbuster.
Everything is, it's been an amazing last year. I mean, the fact that we have another film out and it's doing well, and we've got our 40th anniversary that we're celebrating. It's an amazing time to be a Ghostbuster for sure.
Yeah, without question, whether you are a Ghostbuster or a Ghostbuster fan, I think, honestly, I've said this a few times on the podcast that I think you all have more in production and more irons in the fire happening now than there may have been in 1989. In terms of all the different media production and all the different merchandise that's out there, I find it difficult to point to another time in the franchise where there was this much going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. I think, when Ghost Corps was created in 2015 now, it was created with the sole purpose of bringing all of this back, right? So no one at Sony was really thinking about this holistically as a franchise, and different departments were putting out toys or re-releases of DVDs or whatever, but no one was actually trying to come up with a plan and put all these sort of different projects that were going on together. And so, that's what we've been around trying to do for the past, almost 10 years now, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, you're gonna have your own anniversary next year. When that happens, they're going to take another section of Sony and put a street sign up, and it's going to be called Eric Reich Way.
Oh boy,
it'll be the one right around the corner, like where the cars are parked, like by where the Breaking Bad RV is sometimes in the 2016 the Sony car. It'll be like that. Yeah, there'll just be like an arrow sign that says "Go this way from Eric Reich Way to Ivan Reitman Way."
Someday, you called it.
But I mean, that's a good point you've raised, sort of that like Ghost Core is almost 10 years old, right? And I think for some folks, they're not 100% sure like what Ghost Core is. When I first heard about it, I've heard it suggested that it's like, oh, it's a massive production office that has 200 people working in it, and Sony Consumer Products Division is like right inside of it. And then there's other people who think it's like a mythical office that hands out franchise certificates, but only to the right people.
Yeah.
So I'm
only
just
for
curious,
a very specific time.
Yes, for a very limited time offer. But people still talk about those franchise certificates and things. So I guess like it's a good question to ask you, like, how do you define what Ghost Core is, like, as an entity? What is it on the lot, and how many people are involved in sort of the day-to-day operations of Ghost Core?
Surprisingly, Ghost Core is not 200 people. It's much smaller. At a certain time, we had around 10 employees, but right now, I can count really quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, around 7, 8 employees, I believe, at the moment. And we're based on the Sony lot. We are a Columbia Pictures, which is owned by Sony company. And we were set up basically to do what I had just previously said, which was, connect everything in the Ghostbusters franchise, and specifically in my role, start to understand all the different departments at Sony and what they were doing or hoping to do with or for Ghostbusters. And so that's what I've really been focused on for the last, 8, 9 years now, is understanding all the different departments at Sony, because Sony, unlike Ghost Core, is a giant company. Obviously, big Sony, based out of Tokyo, is a huge company, but Sony Pictures here in Culver City is still several thousand, I assume, employees here. And they all have different departments that work with us. Anything, like you said, from consumer products to animation to VR to feature films, TV, home entertainment, which does all the DVDs and VOD releases. There's a repertory group, which does all the airplane movies and like the live orchestra sort of shows. There's the Sony Music at Sony Pictures that we deal with to do vinyl releases. So there are all these different departments that are working on Ghostbusters, and Ghost Core, and specifically myself, have sort of become the center of that wheel. It's interesting because there's a lot of different stakeholders there. And thinking about prior to the development of Ghost Core on the studio lot and the sort of building of a firehouse facade and a place where the kind of Ghostbusters lives. Yep. There was kind of like this period of time where, there were lots of different spin-off products, lots of different DVD releases, the things you're kind of talking about. But I think you're right. Like, there wasn't really a good strategy to how it all fit together, Yeah, no strategy. I feel nothing against Sony at the time. They were all doing what they could, but there wasn't sort of someone either that was cohesively looking at all the things that were happening. So there would be, releases and toys that could have gone really well together, but because different departments were talking or for whatever reason, that wasn't happening. And then it also comes down to like little things like toys coming out with proton packs upside down, or the wrong misspelling of character names and stuff. And again, nothing against the people at Sony. They're all lovely people, but they all are working on tons of different movies at any given time, and no one is really there to stop and think about things as a singular sort of brand.
It's kind of funny that you use that as the example of, proton packs on toys upside down or whatever, because I think about the number of people who took it upon themselves to correct Target displays.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you are the person who's doing that on a corporate level in an interesting way and sort of navigating that. I find that kind of fascinating,
It's so funny. Every year my mom will dress up as a Ghostbuster for Halloween, and her house has now become like the Ghostbuster house in the neighborhood because I've given her so many, inflatables and different things. But she sent me a picture 2 years ago and her proton pack was upside down, and I was like, Mom, you gotta flip your proton pack over. And then literally last year again, she's like, look, I'm a Ghostbuster again. And I was like, Mom, your proton pack's upside down. Fix the proton pack. So, yeah.
Hey, this is a fun thing to think about, but I mean, you have an idea of where I live because we talked about it off air. And our house is the Ghostbusters house in this neighborhood because there's projectors that go in the windows in September with Slimer and, a variety of different ghosts, one of them looking like an old librarian, one of them looking like it's made of electricity, and a 15-foot Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So I might have to enter into a contest. I'll have to compete with your mom for the better Ghostbusters house. No, I'm kidding. But no, that's amazing. I love that. It's great. And it's kind of interesting you touched on all these different divisions because like what you seem to be talking about is sort of the development of synergy, right? And kind of the like working together of all these different pieces to develop a strategy rather than just product releases that are kind of disparate and not connected with each other, which is such a valuable piece of the current age of Ghostbusters we live in. It's kind of like everything kind of fits together well, and it's something that you've organized well over there, and I applaud you for and thank you for because it makes being a fan so much more fun.
Yeah, and I should say obviously now since we've been here for the last 10 years, things have changed a lot, and it's been amazing being here and working with all these different departments. And like you said, hopefully people notice that it has been a lot more cohesive and there has been strategy behind things, and we're going to continue doing that hopefully for many more years to come.
Yeah, I hope so, because I want more stories, and also because, I like you, and I want you to continue to thrive and have a great position where you are, obviously. But, I wanted to sort of talk about this for a second. You listed off all these different divisions that you're interacting with. I joked about you kind of being President Ghostbuster when you came on, but like you do wear many hats. Like one of the things I often say in passing to folks is like, oh, is the Ecto-1 somewhere? We'll look nearby because it means that Eric is too. Like you are kind of the Ecto-1's, what is it, valet or ambassador? Yeah. Where it goes, you go.
Or at least I know where it's going to be.
Yeah, if you're not there, then you are at least a phone call away to know exactly where it is at any given point. But it's just, I started to consider this in the lead up to us talking, that yes, you have this position at Ghost Corps to sort of manage this as a strategy level, but you also wear hats as like an executive producer, right? And you are on site. Like when they are making Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, you are in London, like there inside sort of the war room, figuring out the pieces of what's going on. So kind of, can you tell us a bit about like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Like what are the various things that Eric Reich has to handle on a given day?
I mean, I guess it just depends what's going on, right? Or where we are in the timeline, because during the making of a film, I'm doing much different things than I'm doing right now. For instance, during Frozen Empire, again, since I know where a lot of these things are, I know a lot of these people, and I've worked with everyone at Sony. I didn't even name like the different production groups that are here as far as transportation and props and archives and all of these other departments at Sony that sort of hold all these different keys to Ghostbusters. So when I first got in the ground in London, one of the first things I did was start to connect with our props department to make sure they got all of the previous props that we have, and then work with them to make sure the stuff that they're developing and that is in the script fits within the world of Ghostbusters and the brand. And that also goes to like the transportation team, working with them to make sure the vehicles are there and the proper, equipment is there with the vehicles. And then any new future vehicles that are in the script, again, like the motorcycle or the Ecto-Z is up to the brand standards. And again, another good example with the Ecto-Z is, I working with the partnerships team at Sony to then find a car partner to be that car. So gosh, literally a million different things. That's just one little part. But I obviously, we also have a ton of different partners on the film. I mentioned Mercedes obviously was one, but we had Liberty Mutual, we had booking.com. And so early on, and then all of our licensing partners as well, Hasbro and anyone doing product for Ghostbusters, a lot of them like to come to London or to set wherever we are to see what the latest costumes are, see what the latest gear is. And so I also help coordinate and deal with all of the partners and guests that we have visiting that are doing something around Ghostbusters. And then I work really closely with like the marketing and publicity team during the film to make sure that we're gathering social content with the actors. We are, doing our photo shoots for the posters and outdoor campaign and early sort of creative that, we can capture on set while we have everyone in one place with, all the equipment and costumes and everything. So that's just a little sort of idea of what I'm doing sort of on a day-to-day basis during production. But then outside of movie windows, obviously we have projects going on all year round. Some of them I can't talk about right now that are still coming later this year, but
wait, what? You're not going to just come on here and tell us everything?
I wish. No, but there's constantly stuff going on. We have the comic books that are going on right now. So I am the middleman between Jason, making sure he's reading the comics and providing his creative feedback, and Gil as well, and Dark Horse, who's doing the comics right now. So
right.
And then Hasbro, obviously, they're constantly developing toys and figuring out what their next items are. So I have weekly meetings with Hasbro, and there's just lots of different people always wanting to do something Ghostbusters. So I stay pretty busy.
It's pretty wild. Like, you do wear so many different hats, like, and it's hard to like, it's why I jokingly gave you this nickname over the, period of the podcast, because you are literally involved in like anything that is an official brand capacity kind of thing. And then some. Like, I mean, look, let's be real. You are also known to be amongst fans like an incredibly accessible person, like who like
somehow
people will just I don't know where you find the time for it. I'll be honest.
It has really gotten hard, and I do apologize to people that I haven't got back to, because it's literally can get very overwhelming with my day-to-day job, and then on top of that, trying to still, stay accessible to the fans that I met from day one. Honestly, like when I first started this job, and when Ivan was like, it's funny. When he first sat down with me and he was telling me about Ghost Corps, he told me he wanted me to be the librarian of Ghostbusters. And I laughed at the time, because I was like, librarian? Like, I don't want to be a librarian. I'm a producer. Like, I want to continue, making films. And he's like, you can produce. But he didn't know what to call it at the time. But he knew that there was going to be some value in that role for me going forward. And of course, I couldn't see it in that moment, but I just went with my gut and trusted that he was creating an opportunity for me. But going back to what I was getting at is just that one of the first things I did was I went to Comic-Con in San Diego and met a bunch of fans, and have continued to just talk to fans and try and immerse myself as much as I can. And when I do have time, in all things fans, so that I know what, everyone's wanting and what everyone's expecting. And we try and sort of use that feedback in our conversations when we're talking about creative and when we're talking about products or anything around the franchise. So
I mean, I appreciate that you are as accessible as you are, and that you try to be, because I think it's something that we are incredibly lucky to have. And I mean, just to give people perspective on this, I don't know, maybe I'm talking too much about my own experience for a second, but when I first moved to Los Angeles in 2010, I lived up the street from the studio. I was in Culver City, and I was like, if you remember where the Cool House ice cream sandwich place was on Washington, I lived
right where it's at.
I lived like right around the corner on Fay. And so I moved in there in 2010, and I used to go for long walks, 2 miles, and go walk down by the studio. And I'd get to like backstage, the karaoke bar across the street from the gate. And outside, like the Ecto-1 would just be parked in the parking lot. And I would just be like, what would happen if I ran across the street and just like made it past the security booth and tried to touch it? And I couldn't believe at that time that like this screen used car was just chilling in the parking lot. Like, to me, it would be like if I went by Warner Brothers and like the Batmobile was just like parked in a valet space or something. And now, like, the representation that Ghostbusters has on the lot is so vastly different, in that you have a straight up headquarters, like
designed
street
like a firehouse. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
with the ectos parked out front.
Yeah. And it's like, in large part, that has to do with, the way that this vision for Ghost Corps came together after that point, 5 years later. Not to be like a Ghostbusters 2 5 years later, but it's kind of interesting.
And that, again, is like the genius of Ivan. That was all him when they were making the deal to do another movie, is his sort of, foresight into needing something like this and seeing what was being done at Marvel and all these other big studios. So, yeah, and Ivan then giving me this opportunity, which has been amazing.
Can we talk about that for a moment about how you ended up where you are? Because I think that's a really interesting thing to kind of dig into. Into it.
I mean, it's a pretty straightforward story in the sense of I was going to school in Santa Barbara at UC Santa Barbara, and Ivan at the time had a production company called Montecito Picture Company, which, for those that don't know, Montecito and Santa Barbara are sort of neighboring towns. And at UCSB in the film studies department, we basically had one option, which was Montecito Picture Company to try and get an internship at while we were going to school. Otherwise, you'd have to sort of find a day you were off school and go down to LA to intern.
Which is a hike.
It's quite
from Santa Barbara is a good 2-hour ride. Yeah, easy.
Or with traffic could be 3-4 hours.
Right.
Who knows? But yeah, so I lucked out. I had applied, I think, twice to get the internship and got it on the second time. And I interned at Montecito Picture Company, which was a great experience doing normal intern stuff. And as my internship was ending, I had become close with a couple of the assistants that were working in the office at the time. The office sort of receptionist was leaving. One of the assistants was actually like, you should just apply to this. And I was like, well, I'm not done with school yet. I think I still had like another quarter or so to go. But he's like, it doesn't matter. Like, we'll make it work. Like, just apply to do it. And I kind of laugh now because I didn't even have to interview to get the job. So Ivan didn't even really hire me. I just showed up one day and I was sitting at the front desk and I was like, hey, I'm the new guy. But so I was there in Santa Barbara for about 2 years. And I obviously had gotten to slowly know Ivan through working there. And at one point, he had been nominated for an Oscar with Jason for Up in the Air. I think that was 2008, maybe. And I sent Ivan a note, just an email saying, congratulations, and telling him how excited I was to be working for him in the company, and that my passions lied in making films, and I would love the opportunity to, one day assist him or be on set and learn from him, even just to go down. And so about a year later, he directed No Strings Attached in LA, and he called me into his office one day and was like, I want you to come down to LA and be my on-set assistant. And I was like blown away and excited. And he's like, we can't pay for you to live down there or anything, but if you can make it down there and like be a part of it. I was like, okay, I will make it work. My parents were living in Thousand Oaks at the time. So I was like, I could easily just stay there and commute to LA.
For folks who don't know this, what we're talking about, that shaves a solid hour off the drive.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was now halfway between Santa Barbara and LA instead of a full, 2 hours away. But yeah, so I honestly, that opportunity was huge for me, and I got to know Ivan obviously even better. And it also started sort of the foundation for my learning of how to be a producer, because literally when you work with a director, every single department on the production is coming to you to get to the director, to get creative answers, to understand, what's happening, what needs to happen. And so I had a very quick education on filmmaking actually on set, because obviously when you're in school, it's not the same thing as what you're learning in the classroom and what you're just learning on the job. So that was an amazing opportunity. And after that, it went really well. And Ivan was spending more time in LA, and he had an office in LA, but didn't have an assistant in LA. So he was like, why don't you stay in LA with me? So when I'm down in LA, we can work together. And so I stayed in LA, and I that was 2010. And then so for the next 3 or 4 years, and I should say at that time, even during No Strings Attached, I was reading Ghostbusters drafts because Ivan was like, we're going to do No Strings Attached and then we're going to do Ghostbusters. And I think actually that's one of the reasons why he said stay in LA with me, because he's like, we're going to move right into, this next Ghostbusters that I'm going to direct. And unfortunately that version obviously didn't happen, and Harold passed away, and, things changed over those next couple of years, but the opportunity at Sony to create Ghost Corps happened within those few years. And Ivan knew at that point now I had been his assistant for, 4 years. And so he knew that I was sort of feeling the urge to get more responsibility and to do more things. And so he gave me the opportunity. He was, first he called it a librarian again, which I still think is so funny. But I just really appreciated that he thought of me as more than his assistant and gave me sort of those responsibilities to start making inroads at Sony and learning the ins and outs of the different departments and who was doing Ghostbusters stuff. So that's the pretty quick story of how I got to where I am right now.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's something that you've accomplished a lot. It's like, we're talking about 15 years of your life, essentially, that you've distilled down into about 4 minutes, which is impressive. But I also think it's funny that he used the term librarian, because in a Ghostbusters context, if somebody calls you that, it immediately evokes something terrifying.
It really does. And I think because at first he's like, you should gather all the comic books, like get all the resource material. So I still have all the same comic books on my wall right here that I bought when I first started, just because I just started reading all the comics and getting them all. So I think that's why he started to call me the librarian at the very beginning, because he's like, I want you to sort of be that resource that has all of the knowledge and the books and the lore, the lore. Exactly. And I do remember too, one of the first things I did was put together these binders with just summaries and pages of like, all the different cartoons that had happened, all the different comic books that happened, the storylines in different books, and sort of showing him where the world was and had been over the last 10 years that he was less involved in sort of the creative of things.
Gotcha. So you kind of were doing this synthesis of all those little pieces that were out there, and kind of creating an internal, almost like Bible, to sort of interact with, I imagine, at that point.
It was literally a 3-ring binder Bible that I gave him and the other executives at the time that were at the company.
That's amazing. I didn't realize that was something you had done. And I think that's so cool, because it's kind of like what creates a common ground for storytelling from that point forward. It's kind of this a piece of lore that everybody kind of sets as canon, and we all debate about that. Of course, like this. That I don't know how many emails you get that are like, "Is Ghostbusters 2 canon? Is Ghostbusters video game canon, Eric?" Which you probably answer all of them because you are very kind. but I mean,
I do get those questions. Yeah,
it's kind of fun to consider this, though, that it's like there are a lot of executives working on a lot of different pictures, working on a lot of different things, and so their ability to have their eyes on the prize all the time about this one thing, seems pretty unlikely. So to have somebody who's doing all that cultivation of lore and storytelling is really important.
Give credit to the fans at that time too. I mean, obviously, like the Ghostbusters wiki and all these different resources, ghostbusters.net and all the different Ghostbusters Facebook groups and stuff. I could not have put that together so quickly without having all that information that was sort of already nicely served up on a platter for me at that time.
We do, I think, a good job as a fandom of being really, really invested in really minor details, which is really useful when you want to begin to cultivate lore. I think this is why I love both Ghostbusters and Star Trek so much, because like Star Trek has a very similar community of people where like there's a thing called Memory Alpha, and it's the Star Trek wiki. And when I was in grad school and I would be distracted from working on like my master's thesis, I would sit down and be like, oh, I'm watching an episode of Deep Space Nine and the Heisenberg compensator is broken in the transporter. What's a Heisenberg compensator? And there's an entire wiki article. It's just like on this completely, fake piece of technology inside of another fake piece of technology. And Ghostbusters fandom kind of is the same way. It's kind of like we have this, we love the faux science of it in a weird way. It's kind of fun.
And I still to this day will go back and reference some of that stuff. If I need like a quick answer and double check myself, I'm just like, let me just check on the wiki or this other site. And it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's great.
We try to keep it up. Along those lines, like what was your relationship with Ghostbusters sort of before you came into this relationship with Montecito and with Ivan?
I mean, I had obviously seen the movie at some point in my in life, but I definitely watched the Saturday morning cartoons and had all the real Ghostbusters toys. I remember my brother and we used to have sort of little battles with the Ecto Popper or something like that.
Oh,
with
yeah,
the little, yeah. With
little
the little
foam darts.
And this is a weird memory, but I literally can remember what those smelled and tasted like because I was, I think, like 5 at the time, and I would bite into them, and I can just vividly remember that right now as I'm talking about it. But yeah, we had the trap, we had the firehouse. I remember pouring slime through the top of the firehouse. So I was like everyone else. I was a kid growing up with the real Ghostbusters, and that was sort of my introduction to Ghostbusters. But to be honest, and I don't know if I've ever said this, when I first met Ivan, I had no idea he did Ghostbusters because it was advertised as the Montecito Picture Company. Actually, I should say I didn't really even know that Ivan was the head of Montecito Picture Company at the time, because I would just look up Montecito Picture Company in college and know, oh, look at all these cool movies that they've done.
Sure.
And, Ivan at the time was there, and Tom Pollock, who has an amazing history, and Joe Medjick, who had worked with Ivan forever. They were all there. So, but yeah, and then as in his office, or in the Montecito office, he had posters on the wall. So I remember walking in that first day to interview and walking down this long hall with all of these posters, and one of them was Ghostbusters, and I was like, oh, he did Ghostbusters. This is crazy. All right. So yeah, it was one of those things that when I walked in the door, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but
isn't
here we
being
are.
a college student fun?
Yeah.
I mean, I say that as a person who teaches college students on a regular basis. Like, there's this sense of naivete about what you're walking into at any given point, and then you're like, oh wow, this is an experience.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, honestly, Ivan's resume that was so huge that like he had done so many movies by the time I interned for him that like it was just overwhelming, the amount of stuff that he had done.
I was thinking about like sort of the legacy of his work, and how many things he created that were influential and instrumental to my understanding of comedy and film.
Yeah.
Like, not to get too deeply rooted in my own life, but like I kind of grew up in a video store. My dad like was working nights in a video store from the time I was 6 until the time I was like 15. And I would go there at night and help him hang out, and, like rewind tapes and check people out and whatnot. Yeah. And I would sit around and watch, movie after movie with my dad. But like Ghostbusters is the first movie I remember in full completion at 4 years old, watching at a drive-in and being terrified of the fridge for like a week. But then I realized like how many other Ivan Reitman pictures informed my sensibility of just like what comedy is, and sort of like what is and isn't funny. And so it's kind of crazy to consider like that you got an opportunity to work not just on Ghostbusters, but to work with somebody who is so adjacent to defining an entire era of what comedy and film is.
I mean, honestly, when I walked in, I was walking down this hallway of posters, like seeing Kindergarten Cop and Dave and Beethoven and Space Jam. Yeah. And then seeing like new comedies like Road Trip and Old School, like the way he was sort of defining comedy in the 80s, in the 90s, and even into the 2000s, which is just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I not to like give you a project or to give somebody a project, but like I had gone to the Skirball Center recently, about a year ago. So not that recently, but there was a big Star Trek exhibit at the Skirball for a while. And the Skirball, for folks listening who don't know, is sort of like it's almost like a Jewish cultural heritage museum in Los Angeles that tells about a lot of the story of sort of like Jewish immigration and the impact on American culture and et cetera. And I walked through there and I stopped and I was like, why isn't there an Ivan Reitman wing of this yet? Like that's because there's so much stuff that, you could sort of tell the story of his cultural identity and coming into the country and sort of coming into Canada. And then by way of Canada, coming into the US and defining comedy and whatnot. It made me go like, man, it would be so cool if there was just like an entire Ivan Reitman exhibit that just celebrated his life and whatnot. But not to sort of digress into that.
I'll put that on my to-do list.
Yes.
Thanks for the suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah. No, there you go. There's like, that's on your, I can give you that on your to-do list. If you want one other thing, a thing I've been talking about for a long time, because I have the one opportunity to say it to you, like while we're doing the podcast, I really need some mini puffed garden gnomes. Like I want them so badly that I'm just like a 6-pack in different poses that I can put in the yard, and I can buy 3 of, so I can put 18 of them around the yard. Your mom can use them too.
All right. I'm going to talk to our Halloween partners about that. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I would, and if you want somebody to review them, let me know. I'm kidding. But, I want to sort of, sort of circle back, because I know I kind of got sidetracked a little bit talking about sort of Ivan's impact and whatnot. But we'll kind of come back to Ghostbusters for a few minutes. Well, I want to ask you, as somebody who's presided over a lot of Ghostbusters storytelling and lore building and cultivating, like, to you, what makes a good Ghostbusters story? Or like, if not just a story, like what makes a good Ghostbusters tie-in product or something that's synergistic to you?
I mean, for me, Ghostbusters has always been about the everyman and this team of sort of unlikely people coming together. And I love the DIY aspect of Ghostbusters, that anyone can be a Ghostbuster, that anyone can build a proton pack and put together, whatever they can dream up in their garage or wherever, with maybe a little extra help. But that aspect to me is always what's so accessible to our brand. And so everything that we're doing, whether it be a toy or a product or a feature film or VR, whatever it is, I always try and look for obviously some of those components. And then, Jason and Gil also are sort of the real creative geniuses behind everything. And but I know that those are some of the things that they also think about when they're thinking of this stuff.
There's an inroads for the average person, essentially, right? Who can sort of relate to the narrative. Exactly.
And it's all about, family and building, a community, and science is also a big thing that we always try and focus on, the stem of it all, and trying to make this science believable and grounded. Because that's another thing Ivan always, tried to keep with it, not just Ghostbusters, but with all of his comedies. They were always grounded in some sort of reality. So
I think that that's a really poignant point. Like, it's something that I've said over the years, that my thing I love about the franchise is that it does attempt to keep itself grounded. There's a sense of rooting it. And it was kind of like the need to go back to New York in the last movie, in some sense, was almost like, we need to now get back to the ground, like kind of get back to the roots and get back into ghostbusting. Even though, obviously you're also kind of touching this idea that it's about family now. And I don't know that that was what the 1984 movie was about. And I'm not sure if that's what the 89 movie was about, but it is, like, to me, at that point, it seemed like they were kind of almost like a chosen family of people who kind of came together because they didn't fit where they were, and they were kind of outcast from the context they were in. And now it's a literal family, and I think that, like, it's kind of changed almost the identity of what Ghostbusters is. Like, did you ever think that the Spanglers would kind of be like the definitive thing, the thing that would tie Ghostbusters together as that grounding root at a family level?
I mean, that is all Jason Reitman and Gil Kennan. At the end of the day, that was sort of something that popped into Jason's head, no pun intended there. And it's the story that he wanted to tell. And at the time, I don't think that was exactly the story that I thought was going to be the next story, but it was such a good one that obviously Ivan and the whole team, like, there was no way we couldn't make that film. So
if you had ever told me a Ghostbusters movie was going to make me weep like a child when I was like 20 years ago, like, why? But that movie's, I love Afterlife, and like, it's such a beautiful story, and it's done such a great job of kind of giving us a new sense of core, to sort of what's going on, as we are going to sort of watch, our actors who we love kind of transition out of these roles over time. Like, we need some sort of concrete basis to be able to hang our hats on here. And I think that it's fantastic that sort of sense of family has been created, while at the same time, like, leaving that space open, that it's like, no, this is about anybody can be a Ghostbuster.
Yeah.
Like, that it's an everyman situation, that anybody can do this. Even Trevor, who can only drive. I'm kidding.
Exactly.
I love Trevor. I shouldn't say that. That sounded mean, and I don't mean that because Trevor's a great character.
He's got a lot more skills than that.
Yeah, he does.
Check out the deleted scene on the roof with Lucky, and there's a nice moment between the two of them.
Yes, there is. I've seen that scene, and I have to say that when we saw Finn on the carpet, we asked him questions. Jason Fitzsimmons, of course, was nice enough to have me come and assist him on the carpet with his coverage, and we were shooting footage with Finn. And we asked him, does Trevor get to drive in this movie? And Finn was very excited, like, oh yeah, he gets to drive. It's awesome. We turned the camera off and I was like, okay, wait, but do you get to drive now? Like, do you have your driver's license? Because the last time you were making a Ghostbusters movie, one of the talk show pieces was that you didn't have your license yet. So
I'm not sure. Did he actually drive? I don't know if he's allowed to. He may have driven a little bit.
He insists that he was like, I can drive. It's done. I can drive. It's quite cool. So,
no, I just mean as far as in production, like it's really
in
hard
Ecto. I'm not sure he drove.
Yeah. I think he actually he did some lessons, I think, in it just in case, but I don't think they ultimately let him drive it on camera just because of all the rules and safety and everything.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been a very short scene of him just pulling out, at the end of the movie. It's the only opportunity Trevor has to drive. It's sort of like, here it is. It's over. The movie's over now. And I think that that's a scene that you all ended up shooting and compositing, from stunt footage coming out of the firehouse, if I'm not wrong, but I could be. You would know better than I would.
The beginning of the shot is in London, and then the second part of the shot is live in New York.
Yeah. It's composite. Yeah. So this is the benefit of having talked with Luke Whitelock and having talked with AC Martin in the last few weeks, is getting to dissect and pull apart what was in London and what was not. So sorry if I'm like, I know things.
No, it's all good. Those guys also know a lot of things, and were really excellent. It was amazing to have them on the crew.
Yeah. I mean, it's been wonderful to talk to everybody who was involved in the production. Everyone who I've talked to only has nice and positive things to say, and they all have nice and positive things to say specifically about you. They're all like, Eric Reich is very nice.
That's very sweet of them.
I wanted to ask you, what is the thing that you've worked on in sort of Ghostbusters lore that you are most proud of? Like, what's something that you point at and you go, I'm glad I got to do that?
I mean, there's so many, honestly. I guess one of the biggest things I think people know is that I'm a pretty big fan of Lego. And so doing products with Lego, specifically the one I was most involved in was the Afterlife Ecto that they did a couple of years ago. That is one thing that I look at and I'm just like, how in the world was I able to be so involved in this? And it's the fun part about products and things for me is where I get to really leave my mark. Obviously Jason and Gil like to look at that stuff and we'll have opinions too, but I have a little bit more freedom creatively to sort of lead those things and to make decisions. So the Ecto is something I'm really proud of. And then also a while back, we did some little golden books. And at the time I had a pretty new niece and nephew that were, young. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to, little golden books are iconic. I can remember, reading those as a kid. So to be able to work on one of those and then to sort of give that to my niece and nephew as a present was kind of cool to leave that legacy. So
I'm glad that you did that because I immediately bought those for my nieces. So that was honestly one of my early contributions to reading.
A lot of the stuff for younger generations, I think, is really cool just because it's something that they always remember. I love meeting, like we have all the time. We'll host sort of people at Ghost Corps and they'll bring in their little kids and they just love everything about Ghostbusters. And it's really fun to sort of have that impact on the next generation.
Well, and I think that's so vital too, in terms of like carrying forward the IP and carrying forward the storytelling. You know, I make the joke often that it's like, we're like the cigarette industry, hook them while they're young, but like, it's not like really that in a malicious way, as much as the reason we all love this franchise in our 40s is because we all have an experience with it that dates back to when we were kids, know? And it's like, I've been talking about things a little bit on the podcast about what's going on, with my mom being ill. And like, it's kind of crazy, but it's like, there are moments in my day where I think of my mom because of Ghostbusters. Because of the effort my mom took to like make an Egon Spengler Halloween costume for me from Real Ghostbusters when I was 9 years old, and then sent me out into the rain with this drooping awful blonde wig that hung in my face the whole day. But like we all have those little moments, whether it was like parents who went and bought you something or somebody who made you Slimer themed cupcakes or whatever it is, like, or the folks who had, like a Ghostbuster being at their birthday party, or, having somebody show up in an Ecto-1, or just having parents who like spent the time to dress up a birthday party experience with balloons and whatnot, such that we all have these positive experiences. And I think that if you don't create more of them, if you don't have kids who end up having those same kinds of experiences, they don't carry it forward. It's a sort of flash in the pan thing to see like, oh, cool, I saw that Stay Puft thingy once, but I don't really have any relationship to it, so I appreciate that. Like the fact that you're considering that and thinking like, hey, how do you make this something that kids want to engage? I think it's incredibly vital, because it's what keeps us telling stories.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're thinking a lot about. And it's even looking at, like I was mentioning, when we meet kids, it's like, what do they have content wise other than the song and the real Ghostbusters cartoons that they can find on YouTube, maybe in books and stuff, but giving them some content, is definitely something that we're thinking about for the future.
Yeah. I mean, not to draw parallels to Star Trek, but I think about, how Star Trek was doing things like Prodigy, a cartoon that was essentially for kids on Nickelodeon. It was also like essentially making callback tie-ins to Voyager, and carrying
putting
out
all these
like
Easter eggs.
Like and sort of putting in Easter eggs, and I'm sort of what I consider like lore building. Not just Easter egging it, but also taking those things and being like, hey, what happened to these characters that existed out there that you cared about, such that parents and kids wanted to watch that thing together. And so I think that is so cool that that's part of what you're motivated on and focused on, because I think it's what paves the way for the future for all of us, is keeping new generations of fans invested in what we care about, and as in fandom sense, it's like you want to be able to pass things down to generations that you loved and cared about. I'm a huge Star Trek fan because my dad was, and in the same sense, it's like, I don't have kids, but I hope my nieces have an opportunity to pick up Ghostbusters and engage it and find something cool about it because, I liked it, and it means we have common ground to talk about as a result, So I think it's so great that you're working on stuff like that. This is a good opportunity for us to kind of talk about, what does the future look like? And we are literally 3 days away from the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters, from Ghostbusters Day.
Yeah.
What does the 40th anniversary of Ghostbusters mean to you?
I mean, it's crazy because I'm about to turn 40 as well. So just like we were talking about growing up with the franchise and looking back and thinking that I've been able to now be a part of this franchise for the last, 15 years, I guess, specifically on Ghostbusters. It's insane how quick time passes. I can remember the 35th like it was yesterday. And the 30th, honestly, when I was, one of the first things, actually, sorry, I'm sidetracking, but one of the first things I did Ghostbusters related was around the 30th anniversary, getting Ivan and Dan to do some of that DVD interview that they did on the Sony lot at the 30th. Anyways, so there's just been all these sort of benchmarks the last 10 years specifically, but even further than that in my own life before I worked for Ivan. The Ghostbusters has always been a part of my life. So 40 years, it's crazy to think that my entire life has been involved in this brand in some sort of way.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild, but like I've said this for a long time, that part of the reason I do what I do and why I'm a Ghostbusters fan to the extent that I am is like, this is the movie I remember first. Like I was 4 when it came out, and I saw it in a drive-in theater, and it was one of the things that just resonated with me. But it's also a thing that's always been there. When I was in college and I had a bad day and I came home from school, I threw a DVD in that said like 25th anniversary on it. When I was in grad school and had a bad day from school, I threw in a Blu-ray that said 30th, or whatever. It's just like I could track my relationship with the franchise in a similar way of like, it's always been there, in some capacity, whether it was as a kid or whether it was as, oh my God, this is the day that I realized that I've been watching it on Pan and Scan and that Harold actually holds up fingers in the background of the scene in the hotel. It's just like all of these little discoveries happen over and over and over again over that 40 years, and it's kind of wild. In terms of you all at a studio level, is there anything going on 40th wise, that you think people should know about, or something that you think people should be focused on celebrating?
There's a lot going on for the 40th anniversary. Obviously, Frozen Empire is now in what they call the home entertainment window, so you can watch it from the comfort of your own home. You can go buy the DVD and Blu-ray very soon. I think June 25th is the date for that. And as far as celebrating goes, I know Sony is having a big sort of celebration on the lot. We're going to screen Frozen Empire for some fans and for some influencers and other folks at Sony, and have a little party to celebrate the 40th. And then the Buffalo Ghostbusters in New York are working with the New York Fire Department and Ladder 8 to have a big celebration there in New York in front of the firehouse, which is going to be exciting. And we've sent some pretty cool items to them to give away at that.
Yeah, that poster's amazing.
Yeah, the poster is really cool. And then at the end of the year, there's a lot to look forward to around Halloween. Some things that I can't talk about yet, but some really cool opportunities to continue celebrating at the end of the year as well.
Right on. So that's when we're finding out about the next Ghostbusters movie being released and also the new VR experience. Like, this is what I've told people now is if you come on the podcast and you don't fill in the blank, I will just fill it in. So that's when we're getting Ghostbusters ice cream bars that are just like the ones that the WWF had in the 90s. They're all going to have like 1 in 10 Garakas inside. That's the death chill flavor. You can steal these ideas, by the way, Eric, if you want to go take them to an ice cream company. And
I mean, all I can say about the future is that the future looks bright. We're still continuing to develop and to plan what the next few years look like, and working with our partners at Sony to do that. So when we can announce more stuff, we will. And then also the LA Ghostbusters have sort of spearheaded this amazing opportunity with the city of Los Angeles. And just like in Ghostbusters 2, we're basically getting the key to the city. And they're declaring June 8th Ghostbusters Day officially in the city, and maybe even the county of Los Angeles. And they're doing a proclamation at City Hall, literally on the steps of City Hall. So that's going to be really exciting on Friday the 7th. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally excited. I'm bummed I'm not going to be around for these things because I will be out east. So I'm not going to get to see those things. Although at one point there was a discussion about potentially one of my Stay Puft inflatables taking the trip to City Hall and being donated and lent to the LA Ghostbusters in the past week. I'm not sure if that's still happening, but I think it's fantastic that, that celebration is happening. And a key dimension of that I kind of wanted to see if you could touch on is that I believe Starlight Foundation's involved in that too, right? That they're kind of part of the charitable partnership you've all had. Can you talk about that a little bit, about like what Ghost Corps' role has been in sort of engaging in charity and, sort of helping to facilitate and sustain a lot of the charity work that fan franchises are doing? Yeah,
I mean, it's one of the first things also that Ivan and I discussed when we were talking about the fan groups is sort of this amazing spirit that all the fans have to do charity work for their community. And it's something we've always tried to support. So I get hundreds of emails a year asking for donation items, which thankfully we have quite a few of from our licensing partners. So I'm able to help contribute to that so that, fans can raise money at cons or at their booths or wherever they're at. And it's something that we encourage, obviously, doing good in your community. So we try and participate whenever we can in that. And Starlight has been one of the charities we've worked with. And again, the LA Ghostbusters have been great spearheading that collaboration. And we did some amazing children's hospital gowns that look like Ghostbuster uniforms that were a huge success. So I believe, if this is not public yet, that they're working on doing a second version of that in the near future. So it's another part of the job that I really enjoy doing. I don't know if you saw recently in LA, there was this Ecto Kia that this woman, Erica, who's in the community and is a prop builder, has created this amazing green Ecto Kia in her own style. And it was unfortunately stolen out of her garage and stripped. And so we've been working with her and trying to help where we can. And we have some surprises coming up for her that we're going to be sharing soon too. So
that's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, I did see that. And it was a pretty unfortunate situation of essentially an art car, that somebody had kind of built over the course of the pandemic, of being like, oh, well, I don't know what else to do, so I guess I'll do this cool thing that celebrates Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just happened to be the car that somebody was like, well, I can get a USB drive in here and figure out how to steal this, which is awful.
Yeah.
Which, not to laugh about it in the sense that's like funny, but like it sucks when things like that happen. And I think it's so important that you are in the position you're in, because if you were not there, that relationship for people to be able to talk to somebody and say, hey, how do we create this partnerships? You know, whether it's a merchandise partnership or whether it's a charitable partnership, like there needs to be a person who's fulfilling that role. And I appreciate so much the hard work you do, because I mean, you've covered so much of what you do, and that just scratches the surface.
And to be fair, honestly, like I try and participate as much as I can, but Sony has a huge team as well. So like a lot of times it's literally just me connecting the right person to someone so that they can make that opportunity happen and get the licensing approval or the sign off from the studio to participate in something. So yeah, it's not just me. There's a lot of people here at Sony that work to help the groups when they need help. So
yeah, no, without question. And I think in a weird way, it's like, rather than being the Ghostbusters librarian, you're in some senses also like the Ghostbusters directory, right? You're like, how can I connect you to the relevant department and keep you in the loop of who you need to talk to get things done?
Yeah.
And you do an amazing job of it, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you saying that. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. And I'm so glad that you made the time to come on and talk with us. You know, we're sort of wrapping up an hour of chatting, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and engage, engage the podcast, engage the fandom, etc. What would, if you had like one ideal thing you could wish cast, anything that you want to get done, and you can't answer the question specifically because you're like, no, it's a thing I'm working on. I totally get it. But is there something that you would like sort of ideally wish cast that you wish you could get done in the Ghostbusters community, or something that is like your dream thing?
I mean, honestly, going back to the fans, and we've talked about this a lot, it's just such a difficult thing to accomplish, but creating a website or a place where all the fan groups can go and register and be able to document their charitable work, so that we as a brand at the end of the year can show the world sort of the impact we're making, is something that I've had on my to-do list for a while. It's just a bit of a legal nightmare with Sony and trying to figure something like that out. But that, again, sort of the charitable side of me wants to create a resource like that that allows people to sort of participate and document the good work that they're doing in their community, and then allows us to, at the end of the year, to show off, you know, what sort of impact this brand is having on the world.
Yeah, the nice portfolio project, if you will, right? Like, and that's interesting you said that, because there's also now like a fan database.
Yeah.
Right? That there's now like a franchise database that has been created by some of the folks over at NYC Ghostbusters and Windy City and Circle City, I think. And they were on a while back and talked about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's something where, and I think it's called whoyougonnacall.org is the website that they've created. But I think you're right. Like, there's a need to kind of be able to talk about not just, hey, it was a profitable experience and it made money, but also like the element of fandom.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's what what really makes Ghostbusters what it is not just that, hey, it's a cool story, but it's a cool story with a lot of cool people who really care about the thing that they're doing and who figure out how to take this sense of being heroes as every people out into their everyday lives, you know? And so I like that answer.
Yeah. And for us to be able to recognize those people and those groups in a more official capacity as well. We'll see.
I hope so. And I'm now eager to find out what's going to happen in October. You're going to have me like waiting with bated breath until Halloween. And that means obviously you're announcing Ghostbusters Fan Fest 2 to take place next year. No, I'm not suggesting that's happening. But you know, I think that you have presided over a lot of amazing stuff, and you've opened a lot of really cool doors for fans, and including this conversation. I'm so appreciative of that.
Of course, yeah.
Let me come out and let other folks come out and be present at things like friends and family screenings and premieres and what have you. And if we didn't have you inside the firehouse, we would be a lot worse off. We're very lucky to have you, Eric, and I'm so grateful for this conversation.
I really appreciate you saying that, and it's been really nice to speak with you and sort of just have this conversation today. So thank you for making it happen.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing what you do as well.
Oh no, I appreciate that, and thank you for everything you do. And Anytime you want to come back on, if you want to come back on and announce when those little mini puck gnomes are coming out, you can come right back on and tell everybody.
Yeah, you will have that exclusive when it happens.
You said when, not if. I think
it's a great idea. We have a lot of partners that do great Halloween stuff, so I think it's in the realm of possibility for sure.
All right, fingers crossed. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Jim.
That about wraps things up for Extraplasm this week. I want to say one final thank you to Eric Reich for coming on the show and making time in his incredibly busy schedule to chat with us, especially at such a pivotal and awesome time in the franchise. It's so great to be celebrating the 40th, and I'm so excited that we got to have Eric on sort of at the same time in a serendipitous fashion. So thank you so much to Eric for coming on the podcast, and I hope we get to talk with him again in the future because he's an outstanding guest and, of course, an outstanding person who helps to make so much of what we love come into being. So thank you to Eric, not just for being on the podcast, but for everything that he does. I also want to say thank you, as usual, to Brendan Pearce of Badoochi Studios, who provides our logo and the visual identity for the podcast. Without Brendan, things on Extraplasm's social media would look way more boring, especially on the pins and the stickers and things that I've made to hand out at Ghostbusters Day. Hint, hint. And I want to say thank you, as usual, to vaporwave artist MAGNAVOX, whose version of Ghostbusters serves as our theme song each week. And of course, I need to thank you for listening, for tuning in each week, for being a part of this fandom. You haven't listened to Extraplasm for 40 years, but you've probably been a Ghostbusters fan for a lot of those 40 years if you're a person who listens to Extraplasm. So thank you for listening to Extraplasm, but thank you more for being such a huge fan of Ghostbusters and being part of this community. It's so great to have such a robust fandom full of so many people who love the same thing, but also who do great charitable works and come together to do positive things. And I'm so excited to be out at the Firehouse this Saturday to see so much of that live and to be a part of it. So if you're out at that event, don't forget to come up and say hi and maybe, just maybe, answer a question for Extraplasm that might get on the air. Beyond that, stay happy, stay healthy, be excited. We're almost at Ghostbusters Day. Celebrate it with friends, celebrate it with family, celebrate it with your Ecto Cooler. Just don't open ones that might get you sick, because you should stay happy and stay healthy. And remember, as Ernie Hudson says each and every week,
try to have fun and always keep on busting. Take care.